Good morning, family. Welcome. Good to see you all. You hear okay in the back? So we'll begin with 3 sounds of the bell, and then I'm going to read a little poem by Tai. And we'll just sit with that for a moment. And so find a comfortable posture for yourself and bring your attention back to your breathing. Maybe a little smile. Contemplation. Since the moon is full tonight, let us call upon the stars in prayer. The power of concentration, seen through the bright one-pointed mind, is shaking the universe. All living beings are present tonight to witness the ocean of fear flooding the earth. Upon the sound of the midnight bell, everyone in the 10 directions joins hands and enters the meditation of Mahakaruna. Compassion springs from the heart as pure, refreshing water, healing the wounds of life. From the highest peak of the mind mountain, the blessed water streams down, penetrating rice fields and orange groves. The poisonous snake drinks a drop of this nectar from the tip of a blade of grass, and the poison on its tongue vanishes. Mara's arrows are transformed into fragrant flowers. The wondrous action of the healing water, a mysterious transformation. A child now holds the snake in her innocent arms. Leaves are still green in the ancient garden. The shimmering sunlight smiles on the snow, and the sacred spring still flows towards the east. On Avalokita's willow branch, or in my heart, the healing water is the same. Tonight all weapons fall at our feet and turn to dust. 1 flower, 2 flowers, millions of little flowers appear in the green fields. The gate of deliverance opens with a smile on the lips of my innocent child. So in this poem, Tai is sharing a little bit about the nectar of compassion, that compassion can transform suffering and violence in our world around us. And it's one of our deep Buddhist teachings. It's one of the four immeasurable minds, also known as karuna. And Avalokita, which is one of the bodhisattvas, is the bodhisattva of compassion. And whenever we do touching the earth on a ceremony, we always include her in that touching the earth practice. So it's a very deep and lovely aspiration, maybe, to practice compassion. Sometimes easily, sometimes more difficult. And Tai likes to say that compassion is the intention and capacity to relieve and transform suffering. So again, it's the intention to relieve and transform suffering. And that could be both within ourselves as well as in others, or in organizations. Any of those areas compassion can be practiced. So he says that the word compassion, the two parts is calm is the first part for compassion, means together with, and passion means to suffer. So you of the Christian faith may be familiar with that passion of Christ, that was to suffer. So that's where that comes from. But of course, we don't need to suffer in order to help suffering. So we don't need to go out and hurt ourselves in order to understand the pain of suffering. Certainly we don't need to create suffering, because there's plenty there to draw upon in each individual, regardless of who we are or how much we've practiced. The suffering is ever present. But it is what we do with it that is the difference, I feel, with a practitioner. So having enough understanding, calm, and strength to relieve that suffering. So understanding, calm, and strength to relieve the suffering. That's our practice. So we might ask ourselves, well, how do we do that? You know, what is the path forward to cultivate compassion in ourselves? You know, how do we do that? And in my experience, it takes a long time, but for others, it may come quickly. And in the Plum Village tradition, it begins, not surprisingly, with breathing. So knowing how to breathe with mindfulness is the first step towards this practice of compassion. Being able to take those 16 exercises of mindful breathing and to be able to be aware of our in-breath and aware of our out-breath. To be aware when we have a short breath, or being aware that we have a long breath. Along with the capacity to be able to follow that in-breath all the way through as it enters our body, and to be able to follow that breath all the way out as it exits our body. In a natural way, not a forced way, just allowing our breath to be what it is and to follow it. So for those of you who've been here for a couple of months now, we've been doing a lot of this. And for those who just arrived, maybe you have as well at home in your daily life, or perhaps you're practicing to cultivate it here a little bit more, to have a little bit more deeper understanding of the in-breath and the out-breath. In my experience, I had to cultivate a daily exercise, a daily meditation practice to better understand my breath, as well as to develop more compassion for others. I'll talk about me in a second, but for others. Because I think many of us in our community are passionate about looking out and seeing problems and trying to solve those problems, or trying to transform those problems, or change those problems. And that's all fine and good. But if we don't also care for ourselves inwardly, with the compassion inwardly, we're going to be limited in our capacity to transform externally. So in my daily life, prior to living here, well, I still do it here, I guess. I would sit in meditation every morning after I got up. And the purpose of that was to kind of better train my mind in what it is that my breath is doing. To know what it feels like to be calm. To know what it feels like to be at ease. Because once I left the house and went off for work, or whatever responsibilities I had, or social justice work, environmental work, that I may forget my conscious breath. And so coming back to my breathing in the morning helped me to know what that is, and so that during the day it becomes a little bit easier to draw upon that energy and to train myself to be calm and understanding in my day-to-day life. So a second practice to cultivating compassion is deep listening. Again, that sounds all fine and good, but what does it mean? And how do we do it? For me, it means to be able to listen without distraction. To be able to hear what is being said and to not filter it through my thinking and my ideas, but to just hear it. And then through deep looking, we can begin to have understanding. So we listen deeply, we look deeply, we have understanding. In having understanding, we can express compassion for the other person. And it's really the deep looking part that sometimes is a little bit more challenging, especially if it's somebody that we're in relationship with, whether that's a work colleague, activist colleague, or partner, any of those things. So we have to look deeply to see, like, I had a colleague once, and I came to understand that she did not like one-upmanship. You know, like, I think you know what I mean by one-upmanship. And maybe because I'm a male, maybe because of some upbringing in me, I recognize that I had the tendency to do that sometimes. It wasn't intentional, and it wasn't meant to be hurtful or anything like that. But with this understanding, this deep looking, I could see that in myself and see that this is difficult for her. And so the practice of compassion becomes one in which I make an effort not to do it, right? So that she can be more at ease with our relationship. And it was somebody that I worked with regularly, every day. So it was important to maintain some level of, collegiality, friendship, and so on. Another way we can practice deep looking is two practices. One is touching the earth, and the other one, what did I write down? No, we'll just go with one for now. Touching the earth. So remember I said that it's easier for us to practice compassion for others sometimes more than ourselves. So in my life before the monastery, so that example with a colleague is one, but another one is I worked with students. So I was a dean at a college, and I worked with students. And students didn't come to see me when things were good. I mean, I was not the person to visit when everything was honky-dory. So almost, 100% of my visitors were upset, even angry, shedding tears, etc. The whole shebang. My professor's unfair, my financial aid isn't coming through, so on and so forth. So my practice was to listen, because in reality, a dean really has no authority. So there's a perception of authority, but there really isn't. So most of the time, I couldn't change anything for the student. It was just a matter of hearing what they said, trying to understand their suffering, and to be compassionate with them in that exchange. My goal was to have them leave my office more calm, maybe even happy, even if they didn't get, their grade changed or the financial aid package that they wanted. And for me, I think that was a great skill that arose from many years of practicing meditation. Many years of practicing meditation. And I also created conditions. Remember I said deep listening? You have to have the conditions for deep listening. So in my office, when I met with students, things were arranged so that there were no distractions for me. So I couldn't see my computer screen when I was talking to the student. The desk was clear between me and the student. I might have a flower or a plant there, something really simple. So my intention was to create the conditions for me to be compassionate and understanding to the student. And I learned that from Thai and this Plum Village practice. That's where I learned all of these things. So it worked pretty well. Now the compassion for myself took a little longer, quite a bit longer actually. And it took a crisis in my life to discover that I had been compassionate to a certain extent, that I sat in meditation every morning and I went to Sangha and those types of things. But to really look internally into what is happening inside and care for this person, Kenley, was a bigger challenge. And I got to a very difficult place in my life after 20 years of practice where I didn't want to live anymore. I was done. I was overwhelmed. I was unhappy. I couldn't sit in meditation anymore. So all these things were happening. And thanks to good teachers and mentors, I was able to create some better conditions for me to transform and be more compassionate with myself. So one of the things I did was I wrote a practice of touching the earth for myself. And I'd like to share that with you today. And just to give you an idea of what you can do for yourself if the need arises. So, I wrote this touching the earth, and I practiced it as often as I could until it became almost a reality. Still working on it. So just imagine Kenley standing in his room, and reading this statement and then touching the earth. And at one point I did record it so I could just be on the ground hearing the voice of myself sharing this. Okay? I open my heart and send forth my energy of love and understanding to the child Kenley. I know now that Kenley did the very best he could, even though he was isolated, neglected, and abused. He did the very best he could to take care of himself. I know that he may have been unlucky and never had a chance to be truly cared for and loved. The coping skills that young Kenley used were needed and necessary: being independent, getting lost in work, slow to befriend. These skills allowed him to feel safe and protected. Today, I know they are no longer required. Today, I send my love and compassion to that little boy. He should know that he is cared for by me and that his parents did the very best they could. I pray to my spiritual family to channel the boy Kenley the energy of love and protection so that his heart will be able to receive the nectar of love and blossom like a flower. And to myself, I pray that I can be transformed and experience the joy of living, that I can let go of those protections and discover a new way of living. I've seen my suffering, both young and old, and they do not want to hold any feelings of anger or hatred. I do not want to suffer. Please help both young Kenley and myself as I am today. So you can write something like that. And that's from deep looking at myself, right? Because we do the same practice for ourselves. Listen to ourselves, practice deep looking, and then you can write something like that. And you can use it as part of your practice. So these are just a few little pieces. To help cultivate compassion for others and for ourselves. And I think I'll stop there and turn it over to my brother Aaron. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kenley. Oh, I just hit the microphone. Got to watch that. Thank you. Thank you. I feel really moved to hear the sharing on. I feel really moved to hear the touching the earth practice. I wonder if we could just take a moment to breathe as we were just instructed. And as maybe some of you saw the talk last night or were there with Fablu, and do that breathing and maybe let the thinking come down so maybe we can feel our younger self inside, what is alive with our younger self right now. Just take a moment to take a few breaths and feel your body. Maybe you feel the contact on the ground, that support. Maybe you can hear the birds out there. And see what your younger self is bringing today here. And we can hear a sound of the bell and breathe with that and holding ourselves with space. Thank you for coming to listen to us, and thank you, Kenley, for setting this, doing all the work to set up the camera, inviting me to be here so I can be a little uncomfortable and nervous and off balance and try to touch some seeds of compassion for myself in front of a group of people. I'm a pretty shy person, so this is not what I would choose to do for fun, like sit up here. But I also feel that you have some compassion for us, so this helps a little bit, a little space that you're breathing, and trying to see that we're doing this together. Maybe your energy is gonna give this talk somehow through us. I'm not sure, but I did walk a little bit today and walked out towards to see if there was any water in the waterfall, but not yet. But I really appreciated the just the glistening of the rain on everything. Did anyone do that? Check that out. Feel that, you feel the energy of the rain coming in. This also reminds me of, I think you brought that up too, the nectar of compassion, like a single drop of this compassionate nectar is enough to bring back the spring to mountains and rivers. This is a line from the Bell Gatha, Bell chant, and that's what was coming to me as I was thinking about compassion this morning. And also, like you were sharing, Kenley, I think the hardest, is it hard? Why is it hard? What is hard? It's difficult to practice compassion for ourselves. I think it's worth being curious about that. What is that? What is that? Or maybe it's easy. I don't know. Does anyone find that easy? Just check. That's beautiful. I was like, maybe that's, for some of us, it can be difficult. And the other thing that came to me thinking about compassion in this practice, our practice, Thich Nhat Hanh, the lineage, or the Buddhist tradition, or just being human, human wisdom. There was a calligraphy on the in a meditation hall, like all these calligraphies here, in the EIAB in Germany, where I practiced for about 6 months before they had to ship me. I was a novice monk at that time. It was 2009, I believe, or 8. No, I think it was 2008. It was 2008 and 9, the winter retreat that I was there. We had just opened the EIAB. It was brand new. It was a giant building and very cold, very German military occupied, strange vibe, very, very heavy. And I was overwhelmed by that. I was like, I had difficulty there. It was a small Sangha. The schedule was such that we were waking up at 5, which is the normal thing, but there in Germany in the winter, it's like 3 hours before sunrise or something, 3.5 hours. It's like, so you're in the dark. Anyway, so I got a little sleep deprived, a little depressed, kind of went a little, I don't know. I lost my balance, let's say. And but I do remember this calligraphy in the meditation hall that was very powerful for me was in Vietnamese. And I think there are some Vietnamese speakers in here that can help me, but I believe it was something like, look back with the eyes of compassion. Nhìn lại, to be, something like that. Is that right? Something like that, yeah. Look, it's often just translated, look with the eyes of compassion, which is very powerful. You mentioned that, Kenley. But I think what was coming to me today was that I think the two words at the beginning of that are nhìn lại, which is look back, you could translate it, which is almost like reflect, I think. But what was coming to me is that, you know, it's nice to be compassionate in the present moment and stay grounded and peaceful, and you're free from your anger and your trauma and your wounds, and you're good. And then something happens and you lose your balance and you say something or do something that you regret, or you aren't able to hold your energy, your anger, your fear. And it can hurt you and it can hurt the other person. And so I think what was powerful about what was powerful me, I mean, it's still very powerful for me, but the sense that that moment doesn't have to be something I carry on with the energy of shame or regret or guilt forever. I can look back at myself and the other person with eyes of compassion. This is a practice that I have to do a lot because I'm still wounded and sometimes unskillful, you know. And so this is what came to me. But to finish, also, I sort of wove in another story there, which was about being at the EIAB and feeling overwhelmed and depressed a little bit loopy. I don't know if you've been sleep deprived, what you know what that feels like, where you're just kind of like. I remember the brothers. They could they could feel. Obviously, I was I think the youngest member of the community, the monastic community there, and they could certainly feel that I was, not doing so well. So somehow it came to be that we're going to have a beginning anew session. And maybe I asked for that, or I would like to do beginning anew with the Sangha, or can we have a beginning anew? I felt like the whole Sangha needs to do beginning anew. This was kind of my thought. And I remember sitting, the brothers there, and they just listened to me for like 1 hour as I shared everything that I was going through, and cried, and so there was space of holding. They weren't trying to fix me or tell me what to do, advice. I know some of you practice nonviolent communication. You know that when someone's suffering, giving them advice is not typically what they're looking for. Yes, people know that. So, yeah, a lot of presence, So I felt their compassion for me, but it wasn't, I think it really started with that energy of presence, of willingness to meet me where I was and accept what I was feeling. And that's, I think, a lot of work sometimes to do, because we have to do this practice over and over to be with our own feeling, right? Cultivating that. I'm thinking about my feelings and I want to solve my problems. And then that continuous practice that Fablu was talking about yesterday too, coming back and what's it feel like in my body to be this way, to be upset, to be confused, to be scared? Can we build our tolerance, for that? I use some terms from trauma healing, because that's some of the work that I do, also somatic experiencing. But it's very much, I think it really resonates well with the Buddhist practice, that our first foundation of mindfulness, we have a body that we have to learn. We're learning to be in this body and the sensations in our body, and not just to feel the shaky and the tight, but also the aliveness, right? I got some. I appreciate the word resource. Sometimes the word resource is used. That we can breathe. That's one. Like breathe, and it regulates the nervous system. But we also just feel this contact, with the earth. And it's stabilizing, it feels pretty good, but also you might feel like if you close your eyes, you can feel your whole body there, the aliveness of your body. Like maybe you feel some warmth, some in the interior, some flow, like presence. You can feel your feet, hands, behind your eyes, your scalp. There's an energy of aliveness that we hold. So this, and then you can even do things like, you might see people sit like this sometimes and think they're closing off, but maybe they're just holding themselves. So to feel a little safer. So that's one way to think. Maybe we try it. Would you like to try it? We do. I know Taifab An is one of my mentors in the Sangha. He was at the EIAB. he likes to teach the practice of self-hugging meditation. This is what we are practicing. See if you feel that, and feel like to feel. Squeeze a little, feel the hand on the arm, the chest. And if you want, you can do, I'm here for you, to yourself, I'm here for you. Yeah. Yeah. So you see, and you feel, do you feel a little more resourced? I don't know, do you feel it like that you can resource? So the other cool thing about compassion is, like, I think it's transmitted too, right? You feel someone, when someone is really there for you and you feel that, you sort of say, wow, I want to keep that and give that to the next person that I'm with. So this, I think, was the gift that I received at the EIAB, the brothers sitting with me as I was feeling all of this, holding that space. So these are the words that came to me around compassion, our ability to be present, to resource ourselves, to create space, and slowing down so we have that space, and then to hold ourselves and to hold the others' feeling as a foundation that allows compassion to arise. It doesn't always arise, but at least we can do this, right? We were talking about that. Prepare the soil for it to emerge for us. So this is what I have. I was going to write on the board, but I think given the time, and I was like, I have a whole bunch of notes on compassion. I wrote down a lot of stuff about the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere and thinking and all this stuff about somatic experiencing, but I think it's good. I think you get some idea. Maybe we'll have more time someday to talk more about compassion. And but I did have the idea, we did a little bit of practice there in the beginning, like holding a younger part of ourselves, but I would like to do one more. Is it okay to do, we have a little time to do one more? And then
I have a question.
And then we do questions.
Okay.
You want to do question now
No,
or?
do the practice.
Practice.
Yeah. But I get to ask the first question.
Okay, first question. All right. So this practice is, like doing what we did earlier, which is the resourcing, like grounding, and I think of it as like touching something that feels good, right? For some people, right, we've heard this now. Some of us are learning about trauma-sensitive mindfulness, and that breathing is not always feeling good for some people, for whatever reason. So finding our resource is very important. It can be just like looking at something that we find beautiful, flower, or even if we can't see it in this moment, closing our eyes and remembering that place so we feel safe, that moment in time when we feel safe in the past. Or it can be the breath, or it can be our seat, the earth under us, or it can be the flow of blood in our body and some part of our body that's not in pain, our hands holding or the hugging, a lot of things. So let's take a moment to resource ourselves, however you do it. And then I want to invite you to do this practice of looking back with eyes of compassion. So maybe there's a moment in the last week, the last days, or it could be further back, but maybe not the most painful thing you've ever felt, but on a scale of 1 to 10, like a 3, 4, something a little bit painful in you or in the person you're with or together. And not figuring it out, just being there with that feeling again in you and the other person. Just being there. I'm here for you. I feel, I see you. I feel you. Just see. Take a moment. See how it is. I'll give you some time. Let's make it specific. Go into, because of self-compassion, ourselves. What we see and feel in ourselves now. That moment. Okay, thank you. We'll listen to the sound of the bell. Thank you. We have a little bit of time, huh? We have 10 minutes?
Yeah.
So we can take questions or feedback. I like feedback, but you don't have to receive the feedback. I'll receive all the feedback if you want. But you wanted to do a question?
I have a question, but if
Okay.
there is a question from
The community.
the community, let's do that first.
Okay.
Just like the upper feedback to Aaron. This was really grounding. These practices feel similar and familiar, but I feel like I went a lot deeper. And yeah, it was very spacious. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajit. Thank you. Thanks. Justin, yeah?
A lot of the time, I notice when I try to practice like self-compassion, I notice like a lot of like judgment for myself come up, like sort of just negatively viewing myself. Should how do I kind of like calm like my judgment?
Yeah, it's a really nice question. Yeah, sorry.
Look at like my suffering, and I notice like kind of judging myself for what I'm like doing and saying. Is that like a good thing?
The question makes perfect sense. Is it a good thing? Are you asking good to judge yourself? Good to, sorry, I'm not sure I follow that part.
I guess like, should I be aware of this judgment, or should I try to let go of it?
Yeah, what to do with that?
Yeah.
So, is that right?
Just say that again briefly.
Oh, okay, I'm going to repeat it, the question, because it's going to help with the recording. As I understood the question, and you correct me, Justin, if I don't get it right, it's practicing self-compassion, judgment arises in me, and what should I do with that? How do I approach that? How do I practice with that judgment energy? Is that okay? Yeah? Anyone have that also? Is it okay if I ask others? Yeah?
There's a lot of hands up in the room.
Okay, lots of hands. I put my hand, this is why I really this is a really beautiful question, because this is, you know, I'm thinking again about Taifab Lu's talk yesterday about, like, is it possible to stop thinking? Is it possible to stop judging ourselves? I mean, I think for me that judgment is also, there's thoughts involved in there, like, how am I doing? And I think a lot of that also comes from the world we live in. How many people have been graded on a test or an exam? Good or bad, right? Like, how many people have been told that you're in some kind of form that what you did was not good? Either you got it verbally or non-verbally. You know, so that's in us. I think it's very important. Like, a starting point for me is to honor what is. So if I want to do the practice of compassion, and I notice a lot of judgment coming through, a lot of negativity, then that also wants my attention maybe first, or is part of that. So it's kind of it seems like a paradox, and I have to be compassionate for the judgmental part. It could be like layer after layer. So I really feel that compassion is not something that we can grasp with the thinking part, conceptual part of our consciousness. We would like to. Like, I'm just going to flip on the switch for compassion now, you know? Like, I'm just going to stop thinking, right? It's not quite like that. We have to be willing to meet what we are experiencing, and with openness. And that's something we receive, I think. It's transmitted to us. Like, we're in a community like this, and people practicing, and we get a feeling of like, oh, this is what it's like to slow down, and to stop, and to rest, and to be with. And it slowly grows our intuition, our insight about accessing that part of ourselves that can say, yeah, I love even the part of me that is critical. That voice, like, can I say, oh yeah, wow, what you did there, like, to myself, my own voice, that was terrible, you know? I hear that voice, and sometimes it's curiosity that opens it. And I can say, whose voice is that? Whose voice? So that's like looking into the root, like, oh yeah, maybe it comes from somewhere in my past when people were critical of me, you know? And so then I think that curiosity is also another channel to open compassion. Does it help at all? Does it make any sense? Yeah? So I would say it's neither good nor bad, but it's just that we have to be with that part of it too. The critical voices that come up when we look at ourselves, yeah. Okay, I don't know. Kenley, you want to add to that? I don't know if I covered it. Time? Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because as we saw, so many of us experience that. And it's just like with any other feeling. We just are aware of it, and we hold it and take care of it. And hope that the compassion is a little bit stronger than the judgment, right? Because what can happen is, if the judgment is too strong, then we end up not caring for ourselves. So this week is a very good example for me because I've chosen to take a mental health day today and tomorrow from my responsibilities here. And that is an act of compassion. And I also feel all those other feelings of responsibility, guilt, judgment, but they're not as strong because I know what it's like if I don't pay attention to the feeling of caring for myself. Because I went, years ago into a very difficult place because the judgment always outweighed the compassion. And I learned the hard way that I need to let the compassion outweigh the judgment. And that's why I can do it now. Because I'm not overwhelmed right now, but I can feel the tingling of it, and so before I get to that point, I'm stopping, and taking a break. And it was really hard not to open my email this morning. But I didn't do it. That was an act of compassion, And so we'll see how that goes. I took it off the home page of my little iPhone, so it's not there to, quickly tap on, And I might make it through 2 or 3 days without checking it. But if I don't, I also have to be compassionate. Because otherwise I beat myself up over checking the email when I said I shouldn't. So on and so. So I think we're all in the same boat. Totally. Yeah. Okay, we got like maybe a minute or two. Is there anything else? You have a thought?
I have a
He has a thought.
I have a thought. These are dangerous thoughts. Sometimes they're, the goal is not to turn ourselves into a battlefield where we're fighting to suppress all our thinking, right? Thinking can be beautiful. Yeah. Thinking in service of our compassionate self is very powerful, right? If Ty doesn't think, he can't write those books. So we need. But the thing was, I wanted to encourage us is that I think compassion is like a superpower, right? And we can. We talked about this yesterday. I didn't mention it. It's one of the 4 immeasurable minds of the Buddhist canon, and the way the Buddha described it, right, is that there's no limit to how much you can cultivate this. But I really think it's like compassion doesn't arise without that one either, over there, the interbeing. When we're separate, it's like it's all about my fault or your fault. Like it's either my fault that it didn't work or your fault that we got, stuck up here today. Someone's got to be responsible. But that's not interbeing, right? It's my fault.
Remember the 4 measurable moments.
Yeah, that's my fault. Okay, right?
I did say it.
But like stepping out of that into, okay, it's not about whose fault it is. Can we hold the beingness of what has emerged, what's happening? And that, I think we can do that together. Like when we sit in Dharma sharing and we hold that space for each other, or when we sit 2 and 2, like Ty is always talking about this, just spend 1 hour listening to the other person. Like maybe here we have that kind of time. We can talk to a friend in this community and say, would you sit with me? And maybe you can say half an hour or 45 minutes if an hour feels too long or whatever, and just let's practice the art of creating that space and being present, we can do it. Okay. I used up all the time.
You did, but I'm just going to say that one more thing. You reminded me of this practice. So I have a dear friend, mentor, elder in the community, John Bell, in the Boston area. And during that whole year or 2 that I was going through this challenge, we spoke on the phone once a week. And it was like this. We tried, he calls it co-counseling. So he listens to me for 30 minutes just listening, and then I listened to him for 30 minutes, just listening, and that's the phone call, you know, and it's really nice. So it helped me through some difficult times. We also had conversations too, but you know, but that practice of co-counseling was really a lovely practice. So we are out of time. So I want to help us all stay on a schedule that the CTC created, whoever they are. And we'll close with 3 sounds of the bell.